Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Lila Shahani, and I'd like to introduce my guest for today, Adora Faye de Vera. And Adora is a very important women's rights activist and human rights activist. She is an advocate who for was incarcerated 4 times, 3 times during the uh, Marcos senior years, and her fourth incarceration was under the term of Bongbong Marcos Jr. And Adora is also a wonderful poet, and she's going to share with us a poem of hers later. And she's also a writer who has written a number of pieces in Bulatlat that I found to be very compelling and interesting. And she happens to be a visual artist as well. So we'll talk about all that later. But first, hi, Adora. And we just like you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? Um, who are you?
Hello, I'm Adora Faye de Vera. I'm 69 years old. I was born in Pangasinan. My father was a lawyer, but at that time he was the vice mayor of the town. And later he was appointed as commissioner of the land tenure administration. That's the government agency that administers land reform under Magsaysay, and later he served under Garcia and then Macapagal.
So this was before DAR, right? Before land tenure eventually became DAR. Tama?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And so we had to move to Manila to be with him. And that's where I studied. But every time during summer and Christmas breaks, we would go back to the province. So I had the privilege of being exposed to both urban and the provincial life.
And your mom?
And my mother was a public school teacher. That's why all of us studied in public schools.
And what did she teach?
She taught biology. And so we were raised in a very liberal family. We were encouraged to read, to explore, and we were never told to act like women, with whatever that is. So all of us were taught housework. All of us, even the boys, were taught how to sew, how to darn their own clothes. And when I went to high school and I went to the dorm because
Wait,
my
tell
mother,
us where you went to high school. It's important.
I went to the Philippine Science High School. I was a government scholar.
Mm.
At that time, the Philippine Science High School only accepted about 125 students all over the Philippines.
Wow.
So I met girls from all over the country. They were my dorm mates. And the school also taught us how to be critical, how to think. So it's not really very different from the way we were raised,
Mm.
because we were encouraged to ask questions, to study, not to just follow things like that.
And just for the audience, for their information, you had 4 sisters and 4 brothers, correct? And that it's a very interesting family in the sense that many of them have different ideological views. And just for everyone's information, Adora's younger brother, is Jed Chair Popoy de Vera. Anyway, continue.
So, when I was in high school, I joined the Ibaka. That's Makabayang Kilusan ng Bagong Kababaihan. It's an organization of young women that worked for women's rights and women's emancipation under the nationalist movement. So at that time, we were already addressing the struggle of women and as Filipinos.
I remember you told me a story about how um, the Philippine Science High School wanted to build on the land, and how there were some illegal settlers there. And I remember you saying that you were torn between loyalties.
Yes, as an activist in Makibaka, and we were working for student rights, we were asking for better facilities in the school because we knew that there was a government budget for better facilities. And then when they had to build a bigger building, the people around would have to be demolished. Actually they were not illegal settlers. They have been there for so long since the time of their grandparents. There were rice fields over there, but the urban planners did not consider that because the land was untitled.
I see. So, in other words, just to clarify to the audience, you were around 14 years old when you began to be consciousness raised. Would you say that's correct?
Yes, I was in second year high school.
Right.
Yeah, and then during second year, those were school issues first. I was already in the third year when we saw these people around who were going to be demolished. So I shifted.
Their spaces were going to be demolished and they were going to be evicted. That's what you mean, right?
Yes, the whole area was going to be cleaned out.
Right. And so,
And
and what was your loyalty? I mean, how did you navigate your needs as a student in the school?
yeah,
And
it was
then,
a sense of justice, fairness, and justice that I felt because we were so privileged. We were receiving monthly stipends, free books, everything,
right,
which came from the taxes
yeah.
of people. And then these people were working hard to the bone and they would be evicted and there were no sure resettlement areas for them.
So,
So I went with my organization, started organizing them, and we joined the barricades to prevent the bulldozers from going through the communities.
it was as your father's daughter, you were very influenced by his concern for the land rights of poor people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Adora, after this, you went to college, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
I went to the University of the Philippines.
Mm.
I was again a science scholar, government scholar. At that time, there were 35 of us who passed the scholarship exams.
You were 16 years old, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So even while I was in school, I would spend my vacant time in the communities. So I went with the organizers up to different areas in Quezon City. There was a very big land problem because of this urban development. Not only around our school, even in different communities. And we organized this whole Quezon City area. And we were able to stop the demolitions.
Mm. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was a very big rally at the Quezon City Hall, and they were all waiting for the dialogue well, for the results of the dialogue. And then they said the demolitions would be stopped. We were all cheering there outside with the poor people there.
Did you have time to study or you were so busy? Because I was like that when I was in college. I was constantly rallying. I mean, or did you have time to do your schoolwork?
I had time, but it was actually very easy because most of my subjects were already taken up in high school.
I see.
The Philippine Science High School curriculum um,
Very good.
had college subjects, and I had subjects in college that used the same textbooks with the same teacher.
So madali lang. Easy lang. I
So
see.
it was easy, and I had plenty of time to work in the communities.
So tell us what you were doing and what was the context of your first arrest? How old were you and what happened?
I was in college when martial law was declared. And when martial law was declared, all our organizations were illegalized. Not only our organization, all organizations, actually, even communities, even everything was made illegal. Even when you are caught with three people outside your home in the streets, that's already illegal assembly. You could be arrested for illegal assembly.
Okay.
So we had to go underground, all the organizations, because even school newspapers were illegalized.
But
And
can you explain a little bit to our listeners, like what were you rallying against? Like what were you so upset about as a young woman in the university?
basically, it was for academic freedom.
Mhm.
And then outside student concerns, the raising of prices, inflation, and the social of the US bases, because we had more than 20 US bases and facilities in the Philippines at that time.
Mm.
The prostitution around it was terrible.
Yeah,
So
that's
we
what
were
you
fighting against that. Yeah.
right. So tell us about the first arrest. So where were you that day?
It was May 1, Labor Day in the Philippines. And of course, we couldn't have a rally because it was illegal. Everything was illegal.
This was 1973.
That, yeah,
You were
May 1, 1973.
you were
And so
17 years old.
just to keep the people aware that this martial law was not normal, we didn't want to normalize that situation. We
Mm.
had to um, we had to speak out. We did lightning rallies when you suddenly converge in a public place, give out leaflets and talk a little, and then disappear before the soldiers come.
Okay.
And on May 1, we planned to put up posters about Labor Day. So I was putting up a poster which said, mabuhay ang huling manggagawa. And I was arrested with, I think we were seven at the time.
Mhm.
There was a chase around the public market.
Mhm.
We were caught. Some of my friends escaped, but I was brought to Camp Aguinaldo, and
Mhm.
it was the ISAP, MIG 5, the fifth MIG.
Yeah, for the listeners, just to be clear, that's the military intelligence group of the armed forces of the Philippines. Right.
Yes. And five is the fifth MIG is the one that's has an area in Metro Manila at
Mm.
that time. And they wanted me to point out who my other friends were, or my other companions, because not all of us were arrested. So they brought me to a mall and made me stand there, and they were in civilian clothes. they were waiting for someone to come up to me because by that time maybe they thought the others did not know I had been arrested. So I was used as a bait. And for the whole day, I stood there, but luckily, no one passed, or maybe they passed and they did not come up to me. So after that, I was brought home to my parents and was told to report every 2 weeks
Mhm.
that they would monitor my activities. And
How did your parents react?
ah,
How did your parents react?
of course, everyone panicked because I had materials in my room. I had books. Well, those books were legal before, but they had become illegal under martial law.
What kind of books?
Well, like um, Clockwork Orange.
Really? Why? Why?
I don't, I don't. And what
Why?
is with Graham Greene?
Are
So many
you?
books
Oh,
were.
we have to talk about this later. Okay, it's very interesting.
In
Why?
fact,
And what did Graham Greene do?
I don't know. There were so many illegal materials, and these books by Renato Constantino.
That I
Renato
understand that.
Constantino was a Filipino nationalist.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he wrote a book, The History of the Filipino People.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those things were supposed to be subversive.
So Clockwork Orange was okay. All right.
Yeah.
Interesting point. To be continued yung rabbit hole na yan mamaya. Okay. So you had to report every 2 weeks
So
from
we took all these books and we didn't know some. We burned some. We um, buried others, etc. There was panic in the house because we know of other activists whose houses have been raided. So
okay. So
we,
how long did you have to um report every 2 weeks?
no, I did not report. I decided to uh, to leave.
I
I
see.
went to another place.
I see. And it was at this point that you met your husband, Matt.
Yeah.
You tell us about that?
He was also an activist uh, working with the urban poor communities
Mhm.
before, and he had to go underground too because all of us had to go underground. And that's where I met him. And so together we transferred to another region outside Metro Manila because at that time there were no cell phones, no the intelligence community was very fragmented. You just transfer to another region and they don't know you anymore.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, the units didn't
We're not.
share.
Yes.
Yeah, they didn't share information because each one wanted to be the one with the most arrests, etc.
So,
So
3 years later, at the age of 20, you were arrested again.
yes, I was traveling from my home in Metro Manila because I still went there. I would go there and just for a short time. And if I felt maybe I was being trailed already, I would leave and go to uh, both me and my husband would go back and forth to Manila. And there was a time when our house in Novaliches was raided by the
Mhm.
military, and we were not there. And my father-in-law and brother-in-law were arrested. So my mother-in-law who had my baby at that time, she was taking care of my baby, transferred my child to our parents because she was already alone at home.
Right. This is your child, Amado, right?
Yes.
But
And
yeah, go ahead.
so in one of my travels from Manila to Bicol, we were arrested while on board a train.
Right. And you were not the only one arrested.
There were three of us, and we were heavily tortured.
Yeah, and um for the listeners, Adora has asked me to describe her experiences briefly, and um we'd like to be as mindful as possible of the stress that it causes everyone to repeat a traumatic experience. So, to spare her, just going to give you a brief rundown of what happened. So, she was on the train, and she was with one man and one woman. This was in 1976. And she was, where were you taken? Just tell us the part of the country.
That was in Lucena, Quezon.
Right. Okay. So she was incarcerated for 9 months, and a lot of um, a lot of stories that have been written about Adora tend to sensationalize her experience, and she and I have talked about it, and we feel that it is very important to be accurate. The descriptions generally tend to describe her experience as having been gang rape, and when she was incarcerated. But out of respect for her and her story, we feel that it should be corrected and that it was not actually gang rape as much as it was serial rape. She was raped numerous times by different people and also assaulted by an entire group of people at the same time, but it was not gang rape. And so, just so the listeners know, um, in this, the perpetrators were from the military intelligence group of the armed forces, the second MIG, and also from the 231st and second Constabulary Security Unit of the Philippine Constabulary. And again, for the listeners, there was a difference between the armed forces and the PC, because the PC was essentially the military police. And since then, it has become civilian police, but at the time, it was military police. So, a captain who was in charge of the unit in which Adora was placed ordered a corporal to rape her while he watched. And at the time, she collapsed because of stress. And a colonel and a civilian burned her fingernails and her toenails with cigarettes and pulled her hair off her legs and her knees. And this was followed by sexual abuse headed by another corporal and another civilian. And then at some point, she was put in a Bartolina, which my understanding is, would you say dungeon is a correct word, a correct translation for Bartolina, Adora?
Um, well, a dungeon is something deep.
So this
Yeah,
was
but The Bartolina is on the level, but it's a room that has no windows.
Right. Where
And
the torture takes place.
yes, and I that Bartolina where I was placed in did not have any bed. You have to sleep on the. You have to lie on the floor, and the cockroaches and rats would be running over you.
Right.
Something like it's dark
Um,
inside.
when Adora was in the Bartolina, there was a group of men that were forcefully uh, making sexual advances towards her. And after this, uh, the head of the unit, the captain, raped her. And another captain and a lieutenant made her undress, and she was often in a state of undress. And what is interesting about her story also is that the woman with whom she had been arrested uh, was also uh, raped several times by different men and eventually became a desaparecido. She could not be found afterwards. Um, and there was one instance when a lieutenant tried to rape her again, and when she resisted, he hit her several times in the face, which sent her careening across the room. Um, the head of the unit, the captain, pretty much decided to have her under his protection. She was not a concubine or a mistress by any stretch of the imagination. I would say that perhaps the most accurate way of describing what then ensued was that she became like a sex slave of this man. Would you agree, Adora?
Yeah.
So between 1976 and 1977, this captain would take liberties with Adora whenever he wished. And I quote her from an earlier conversation that she and I had. And she said, he would dress me up and show me off to the other higher officers who came to the safe house and described me as a wild horse he was able to tame. Later, he once told her in private that he had this feeling that his horse would kick him once he turned his back. And I think that is important to set the record straight because there are some people, even in the left, who assumed that Adora enjoyed it, and why didn't she leave? And I think the point here is that she had no opportunity to leave, and the entire time she was there, it was against her will. Of course, the experience in incarceration was not homogeneous in the sense that there were some lower ranking guards with whom she ate that felt some sympathy for her. But they couldn't do anything because these were their superior officers. Now, at this time, her father tried very hard to look for her, and he, because she was under the intelligence services of the armed forces, um, you know, people that she knew, including a family member of mine, were not able to help her father, because they didn't realize that ISAP, which is under Johnny Ponce Enrile and Fabian Ver was in a different unit altogether. At this point, because she was gone for so long, Amado, her first son, he was told that she had given him away, which was not true at all. And she ended up being under the care of the Amado ended up being taken care of by her eldest sister. I think the idea was that Adora would be groomed to be an agent or an informant against her friends and colleagues when she got out. And it was the stress of this entire experience made her toy with the idea of committing suicide. And then she finally concluded, why should I? I didn't do anything wrong, which was true. And so upon your release, you went back home. Tell us
Yes.
about that.
Yeah, and I went back home and I enrolled in. I went back to school,
Yeah.
and I went to work so that I would be very busy and I would have a reason to tell the intelligence people that I hadn't time to do what they wanted me to do.
Right.
Uh, but they still had me report to them every few weeks. And even when I reported, this captain would treat me as his property. And all I could report was that I wasn't able to contact anyone because, so they said, just wait, they will contact you.
So at this point, you decided to write to Amnesty International. And,
I wrote to task force detainees and they forwarded my report to the Amnesty International.
and what did you write in that letter?
Yes, I had a test. I wrote everything that happened to me. And
And you named names.
yes, I named names because for so long, I even got the serial numbers of some of the soldiers.
Yeah, I saw the report. It's very accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I even got plate numbers of their cars, but I didn't put that in the report because I didn't think it was important. And and I learned about this intelligence projects, but I did put that in the report also.
Mhm.
I just wanted to spread it through the grapevine so that those they were planning to kill could escape, but unfortunately they got to those people.
So that report must have had massive reverberations. And I mean, in terms of the people that you accused, also in terms of your own safety. Would you agree?
Yes, it had repercussions because this colonel who was promoted to general and he was sent as a military attaché to Burma was recalled. It's they were scandalized by the report and a price was put on my head. So I had to go underground again.
Mhm.
And I wasn't safe even in the city, in the urban underground. I had to go to the hills.
And just for the listeners, the captain um, who did most of the abuse against Adora was captured in 2005, and he was assassinated in 2005 by uh, the CPP NPA Sparrow unit.
Yeah, I read that in the newspaper.
Yeah. So now let's talk about So you're married to, and your husband, you're married to Noni, and you have come out of, you had been released. So how did that affect your relationship in the beginning for the first year, would you say?
Uh,
Been very
yeah,
traumatized and
I was traumatized and I didn't want anyone to be touching me.
yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine.
so I told my husband we could separate if he couldn't take it.
Mhm.
But he said we can work it out and he will wait. So we didn't separate.
Because
And
that's one.
he also helped me explain to the other friends there. My comrades were many were questioning what happened because I was the only survivor. That's
Right.
natural. They would ask, but I mean, if they ask me why was I alive, why wasn't I killed like the others? Of course, I couldn't answer that. I told them, you ask them why.
So, in other words, you felt that there was the implication coming from your comrades that um, you must have colluded in some way to have been spared.
Yes, they were even asking why I was raped, as if that needed an explanation. When I was already there, they were ready to kill me, and I had to explain why I was raped.
Right.
And some went to the extent of asking if I enjoyed it.
Mhm.
Although, of course, those were not. That was not the general trend. Those were individual people, but even if they were individual people, they hurt the most.
Yeah. And so,
Because
I mean, what is sort of striking here is that you encountered misogyny from the state, the state apparatus, and then you encountered misogyny among the very people who you thought would support you and embrace you back. Not all, but some.
yeah, because well, I think I was a little naive. I was the first who came out that I was raped. The other women who had been tortured and raped before were ashamed to say it.
And so you feel there was a
I came
stigma.
out publicly.
And you do feel there was a stigma against you.
I think they didn't know how to handle it
Mm.
because it wasn't a thing that was discussed before.
Right. And so, and I remember in one of our earlier conversations, you said that even your husband, Noni, became quite jealous about your going out and going to the store and events. And do you feel that that came from having heard about what happened to you and this lingering fear that you might have enjoyed it kahit papano?
Yeah, he knew the whole thing because I read that report to him
Yeah,
and I discussed it with him.
yeah.
But of course, there's always a question because it was something new to them, something they could not imagine. So
Mm.
there was this one comrade who told them to don't make judgments about something you haven't gone through.
Right,
Yeah, because it was something so different. And before that, the rape was only discussed in whispers,
right.
in very select groups when
Oh,
they talk about cases, because sometimes there were cases of rape in the barrio and they would ask for help. So that would be discussed by very select people. But this one was public. I
and
came out publicly. So
what, and in other words, did your mother and the women in your family did they try to dissuade you from going public, or because my understanding is the majority of your family was extremely supportive of you.
They did not, I did not tell them that I was raped. In fact, they didn't know I was tortured.
Right, yeah, it was your
Never
mother.
talked about it. Yeah, I never talked about it. And when I came out in that written testimony, I already left home.
I see, right. So at
So
least
maybe they read about it.
you spared
Yeah,
them. I see.
because
Okay.
I didn't want them to get involved.
Right. Now, but after about a year, you made peace with Noni, right?
Yeah. We made peace, but there were times during quarrels when we're under stress that it would come out. The issue would come out. I think those things don't get forgotten easily. But when the incident was still fresh, and we held formal meetings about it so
Mm.
that I could explain to my comrades and the other women there about what rape really is all about, he would defend me. Many other comrades would defend me because there were some women who really, um, I mean, they would ask me if I fell in love or did I enjoy it, things like that, which are, I think that's so nonsense. But the fact that they asked it, asked those questions means they really didn't know much about these things. So it became an educational process.
Right. Because rape is a matter of violence more than it is about sexuality or sexual pleasure.
Yes.
It's
It's,
power.
it's about power. And that situation when they were already killed the two, and they could kill me anytime they wanted. That's absolute power. They
Yeah.
could do everything they wanted. In fact, when I was there inside the safe house, every morning when I woke up, I would look at myself in the mirror and ask myself, is today be the day I will be killed?
Mhm.
Am I going to be killed today?
Mhm.
Because there are some old people who said that if you're gonna die, your face changes. So I would look at my face and say, has it changed? Am I going to die today? Because the threat of death is always there.
Mhm. Mhm.
So how could you enjoy something like that?
But it's a very painful realization of how women are always sullied by, in the eyes of others, doing a rape over which they had no control, more so than the men who actually perpetrated the crime.
Yes.
That's very sad. And I would imagine that, I mean, that's a residual Catholic view, which I would think not everyone in the left necessarily followed officially, right? I mean, they were not necessarily religious, were they?
Some were,
Oh,
most were not.
I see. But still, there's that lingering bias against impurity, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Right. And so,
And this was this patriarchal culture of everything's the victim is always is always to blame.
like you were being sexy or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So someone asked me, "What did you do? Why were you raped?"
Right.
I mean, I laugh at it now, but at that time it really hurt.
So sorry. Um, so tell us now about, fast forward to 1983. So you were pretty much underground in the provinces at this point.
Yeah, I continued organizing peasant women.
And
And
this,
it
sorry,
yeah, at the time, and it was in the mountains, you have relative freedom relative to the urban, because as long as the soldiers are not there, you can do anything. We have sister sharing groups. We band together to, what's this? To talk with a husband who is abusing his wife and warn him. Yeah, all of us in the group, all the women would go to the house and tell the husband to stop.
So there was more equity in the province, gender
Um,
and I guess social equity.
not really, but the movement was there, so we could push the women's agenda,
Mhm, I see.
and we could always tell the men that, look, these women are not your enemies.
Right.
It's
So
the military who's killing us.
so you were 27 years old in 1983, and
Yes, I
you're
had I had my second son already at the time.
and tell our listeners the beautiful story you told me about Ron. Like, what does Ron's birth marked an important his sorry, not his birth, the act of conceiving Ron happened as a marker for the healing that you and Noni had begun to create, right?
Yes, it
A year
was
after your incarceration, after
yes,
prison arrest.
after the rape. Yeah, and so there were many ups and downs in our relationship, but so with the healing, finally we were resolved that it was something past, and we were more or less normal again. So we had this. So we had a son,
So that's
and
wonderful. He's like he marks your the beginning of your healing.
that's what I told him. I said, well, every time I look at you, I know you are the signal that I had overcome it.
You know, for
And
the listeners, Ron is a wonderful human being, and he's another person that I interviewed for a paper I was writing. And he's an artist, he's highly intelligent and very respectful of women. And so I think that, good job there with that young man. Um, so tell us, what were you doing that day in 1983?
I was printing education materials, the short courses for women and children, how to handle children, because we had this, what's this? We were educating people that children can feel their own empowerment if they know what's happening around them
Mhm.
in in a way they can understand. So we are not advocating that children should be kept separate from the movement or things like that. They should know what's happening, and they should be guided on how to handle these things. So we were printing materials. It was this V type. If you're not familiar with V type, this is a Vietnam type style of printing. It's a silk screen where you put a stencil, you put ink, and then you use a squeegee with a
Oh,
paper underneath. So there's one who lifts up this silk screen, one who puts in the paper, and one who takes it off, and then there's one who dries all this ink there.
oh, cool.
Yeah, that's manual. All of it is manual because we
Wow.
don't have any machines or electricity in the villages. So there were a number of us because every time we printed things, the youth around the village wanted to join. It was a time for them to share stories with each other while doing that.
So what happened? I mean, so you were
And
doing.
then there was a raid.
Mhm.
They, the military raided us. It was early in the morning, and they just shot. They just shot and shot at the house, and husband and wife were killed,
Mhm. And what
and
happened to you?
I was shot in the leg. And it was good that I was standing, because if I was lying down or prone, it would be the head. So because I was standing, it was my ankle that was hit.
Right. So then what happened?
And then, of course, I couldn't run anymore. I was captured. And the two young men, they were both 19 years old at the time, they were shot in the head.
Mhm.
They were alive and they were shot in the head.
Gosh.
So when the soldiers went near me and they were all over and they were um, pointing their guns at me, one of the soldiers said, "Pare, akin to." So they didn't shoot me.
So do you think it was because you were pretty? Is that
I couldn't breathe at that time. There was blood all over.
so why would they say that? Why do
No,
you
there,
think?
there was this one soldier. When I was crawling out the door, he crawled and ran and pulled me aside. And he said, "Don't go there, you'll be killed."
Really?
Yeah, he pulled me aside. So I took hold of his belt, because I knew that if I was near him, they wouldn't shoot at him. So,
So he saved you in a way.
huh?
He saved you in a way.
Yes, he saved me.
And
And
what do you attribute that?
I don't know, maybe he had some friends in the underground, or maybe
Sim-
he had some good humanitarian sense or what. But he really risked his life. He ran and pulled me aside. It I didn't know, because I was scrolling towards a group that wasn't shooting. I didn't know
I
there
see.
was a blocking force there. So he pulled me aside, and then um, when these gunshots were over and they had killed the two young men, and they were going to kill me, he said, "Pare, akin to."
Right.
So they allowed him.
So, all right. So you were shot in the ankle. And so tell us about that injury.
My bones were shattered, so I had to undergo 7 operations.
Mhm.
That was incomplete, because it had to be more than 9. But I said, as long as I can already stand and move about, I didn't want additional operations, because it was really very difficult it was both emotionally and physically taxing.
So
Um,
you were brought directly to Viluna Hospital.
no, I was brought to a regional hospital,
See.
and I was brought to the camp, and then the military doctor was also the doctor of the regional hospital, and they said, "Bring her to the hospital,"
Mhm.
because this doctor was also a sympathizer. He was a military doctor, but he was a sympathizer, and he knew me. I've been having meetings with him before.
So there
So
are three. I mean, so in the second arrest, you have some military that were some of the lower rank and file were sympathetic to you. Then you have this military guy who helped you, and now you have this doctor. So it's interesting that it's not a homogeneous experience that you've had with the military. There, once in a while, there would be some good eggs.
yeah, I've always looked at the military as a very reactionary institution. It's a fascist, terroristic institution. But I look differently at individuals within the military.
Right.
And I have some relatives who are in the military.
Yeah.
And it's very sad, because I have seen soldiers who started out as good people, and they were brutalized inside. Even during my second arrest, there was one guard whom who shared stories with me, and he became a soldier only because his father was a soldier. And inside the safe house, when they wanted to torture a victim, they would tell him to, "Oh, you hit," even if he didn't want to. He had to do it.
So then
So,
you become
yeah, they are also brutalized in a way by the institution,
right.
even the good people.
So
I, the good soldiers have to struggle within the institution to keep their humanity alive.
right. And so at what point did they bring you to Viluna Hospital in Manila?
I think that was about 2 or 3 weeks in the regional hospital, and then they brought me to the AFP Medical Center, that's the Viluna Hospital, because it was the 52nd PC Battalion that captured me. I think they got the reward, but they turned me over to the ISAP again. The ISAP requested that I be turned over to them.
Yeah, so for the listeners, so again, Philippine Constabulary captured her, but she was turned over to the Armed Forces Intelligence people. Okay.
Yeah.
And so there you had to have surgery in Viluna, correct?
Yes, I had surgery in Viluna because the military doctor recommended that I have surgery there after the first surgery in the regional hospital. He said I needed another one, and so I was brought to Viluna, and they put metal pins on my leg to stabilize the bone, and I was
You were
con-
interrogated right before the surgery.
yes.
Tell us about that.
That's a captain of ISAP again. And I was interrogated, and I was shown pictures if I knew these people, etc. The works. And
What did you do?
I told him that you know more than I do. Why interrogate me? You do your homework, I said. You have those pictures. And also, they started convincing me to retract my testimony about the earlier torture. This captain offered to credit all the years from 1977 to 1983. They would credit these years as my mission as an action agent because I had signed an agreement as an action agent. So they said they would credit it as a mission if I cooperated with them and if I retracted my statement.
Which you wouldn't do.
Of course, I wouldn't.
And so you shouted at the captain, as far as I remember.
Yeah, I shouted because I was already in the elevator. Well, I was in the eighth floor. So they took me down to the operating room. I was already in the elevator, and I already had the shots. I was starting to get sedated in preparation for the operation. He was still interrogating me. So I shouted at him. And I said, "Get out."
And it was at that point that your mother heard what had happened to you.
Yes, because when he was interrogating me, and he was asking if so he was saying about everything about this meeting, etc. And he was asking about the projects because apparently my report about these projects, I reported these projects because I wanted to save the people who are going to get killed. And I think this report about their projects got into their hands,
I
and
see.
they knew it came from me because
Right.
they said no one else would know about these projects.
Mm.
So of course I did. I said, "Well, that's great. That the one who got those projects was smart." And so we started talking about the torture. When he said, I would become an action agent. I said, wala na kayong kadala-dala. You never learn. I said, after everything you did to me. And my mother was listening.
So
That's when she cried.
I see. So that was when she learned.
She learned I had been tortured.
Right. And so at that point, you spent 1 year in Viluna and 1 year in Legazpi.
Yes. In
Right.
Vilna, it was a secret room
Yeah.
at the 8th floor. And
Which I
the
didn't know about. For the listeners, my grandfather died in Viluna, but I had no idea there was an eighth floor there. Anyway.
yes, because it was under the jurisdiction of the ISAP.
Mm.
Even the other doctors are not allowed to go there. So when I was there, the doctors who operated on my leg could not check it
I
because they were not allowed to go up to that place.
Right. So it's really secret. Um,
Yeah.
Great. So at this point, um, tell us about Noni's abduction. So you had all these surgeries. You had 7 surgeries. You should have had 9, but you were just too exhausted to continue with the entire treatment. And so you were in and out of the hospital and in and out of surgery.
Yes,
And
it was already at the Philippine General Hospital after I was released.
right. And
Because in Viluna, they said they didn't have the budget to go on with the surgeries. And my leg was becoming infected. It was already black and pus was going out of these pins. So they had to remove the pins.
my,
Yeah, and they just put a cast on my leg and left it at that. And I couldn't feel anything anymore in my leg. The smell was terrible. And
you've lost about an inch, right?
yeah.
So it affects your walking. You walk with a cane, you said.
And we didn't, yeah, I work with a cane now. We didn't want to produce the budget or the money for the surgery in Viluna. I said, if we could raise money for my surgeries, it would have to be outside. Because in Viluna at that time, I could see even their own soldiers were being amputated.
I see.
They didn't do anything to save those. Even the soldiers had to pay for their own x-rays.
I see.
The corruption was terrible.
I see. So
Time.
tell us about um you, at that point in 1985, you were released. You were 29 and you joined Gabriela, you know,
Yes.
the women's group. And so at that point, you and Noni were living separately,
Yes.
right? And so um at what point did you sense that he was not around? At what point did you start to worry, like, where'd he go?
Well, it was Father's Day, and he was going to eat outside with my son.
Ron.
Yeah, he was with Ron, and he just told Ron to wait a little there because I have to meet someone. And then he never came back. So my son went home alone, and I was so angry. Why did you? I was thinking, what happened? And I went to his house the next day to check and to tell him he was an irresponsible father,
Mhm,
but he wasn't there.
mhm.
And then I checked again a week after, and he wasn't there. And his parents said he didn't come back. So I thought maybe he had gone somewhere. Maybe if he sensed his life was in danger or something like that. I asked around, and then we started to ask around. That was in June, and it was only in July, around late August, when we realized that he had been abducted because we have searched we have asked all over the houses of people he knew, and then there were two of them. He was abducted together with Jimeniano Valberto, so his wife also helped in looking for him, the two of them. And I heard that was around August when I heard news report that they were arrested,
Right.
Quezon province. So his parents went to Quezon, and the reporter said it was a statement from the military, and then the military said they didn't issue any statement. And then when they saw his picture there, there were pictures in the walls of the camp. And then they saw that the picture had already had an X in it.
Right. So
And
they
we
so
knew that,
so I mean that must have been very traumatic. I mean, the realization that, oh, he wasn't an irresponsible father, he was taken. And then for your sons to just know that he's gone. And you said that Ron realized it when he saw a picture of his father in a school exhibit.
yeah, there was a school exhibit on Human Rights Day.
Mhm.
So there was an exhibit about victims and about disappeared people,
Mhm.
the desaparecidos, and he saw the picture of his father. So all this while, I was not telling him that his father was missing because, well, he was going to school, it would affect his grades, things like that. So I was looking for the right timing, and then he saw this. And he didn't tell me. He went to his grandma. We were living then with his grandma, and he told his grandma not to tell me
Mm.
because he said Mama would cry.
So that is so, so moving that you both were trying so hard to protect each other
Yeah,
from
and
this. Mm.
so in
The
fact, he
the
didn't cry. He didn't cry when he told me. He was trying to make it very soft for me.
he's so
Uh, it- but I learned later that he was with his cousin. He had
yeah,
a younger cousin, and the two of them were hugging each other and crying.
that's so beautiful. And so Adora, all this time you were in the province working with peasants. And I remember you told me a story about learning how to plant and planting banana trees and what happened when you went back to this place.
Yes, because the time you can work well, you can discuss things with peasant women is when they are working. They don't have much time in their hands, so we could share stories while working.
Mhm.
That's why I learned how to plant. I learned how to make copra, this coconut meal.
Wow. Okay.
I We would pick the coconuts and unhusk them and cook this coconut shells. I learned all these things because I had to be with the women to be able to share stories with them and feel how they were feeling.
Mhm.
And I became friends with them so much that sometimes they left their children with me when they
Mhm.
had to go to the market because I couldn't go with them to the market. It was underground. And they left their children with me, and I would be the one who took them to the river for a bath. And I was always the tita of the children. And because I knew how to, I learned the herbal and massage with with these old helots,
You're
the
a woman
parmelas.
with
So
many hats. Yeah.
I would, yeah, I even helped giving, I helped help the women give birth.
Well, you must have developed really deep friendships with other women.
Yeah, I enjoyed their friendship. They were so natural. And the fact that they didn't even know who I was. When I go to the barrios to organize, they would know I was Gabriela, but they didn't know anything about me. I didn't introduce myself. I was just an organizer. I was one trying to help them. They took good care of me. They would. There are times when I got sick and I couldn't go home, and they would take care of me there in the villages. So I learned how to plant, and then there was this time because I have been moving around different organizing areas. There was this time when I returned to a barrio where I had not gone back for almost 10 years, and then there was this woman who gave me a bunch of bananas. And she said, "This is for you." And I said, "Why me? There are so many of us." She said, "No, this is for you because it came from your plant. You were the one who planted that banana tree," they said.
That's wonderful. It's so wonderful to be remembered like that.
Yes, and wonderful to see these children grow from little kids, and then later I see them as young people who become activists also, and very was this attentive to the problems of the barrio, learning things.
So, Adora, your fourth arrest in 2022, by that time you were 66, 67 or so. Um, we don't really have the time to go into that arrest. But as I mentioned earlier, the, it was already under Bongbong Marcos's term. Um, and so that was a difficult incarceration because you were much older. Um,
Yeah,
and so um, I want you to and later tell us about the poem that you wrote to your lady guard. And you can tell us about that. But before we do that, maybe you can tell us about um, your observations as someone who has been incarcerated, been in a kind of very educated urban milieu, and then uh, among activists in the urban context, and then activists in a rural context. What were your observations about um, all your experiences, the span, and we go from Marcos to Marcos, and so you've seen your whole life resisting, and in our own lifetime, we come back full circle. So, what are your observations?
um, well, this whole span, of course, I went through so much, but it was a big learning experience. And first, I think we have gained so much, despite what you say coming full circle. We have gained so much because when martial law was declared, the only ones who resisting it were the activists
Mm-hmm.
and the civil libertarians. So we had to really educate people until the dictatorship was put down. And that education process, I think, is a very big gain for us because now it's easier to tell the people that we do not want martial law to return. Although I think we have not, there was I don't say a failure, maybe because we were so busy with other problems, because the Philippines is a really very problematic country,
Yeah.
that we didn't push the evils of martial law well enough.
Yeah.
And the younger generations, it was 14 years. There was a whole generation that grew up not knowing what freedom was all about.
Yeah.
They were told in the schools that blind obedience to authority was the best thing for the country.
Yeah.
And so for them, this
Ano ba yun? Sorry to
and they
interrupt.
can't even see that what's happening now is almost like martial law.
I'm
With
sorry to interrupt you.
dropping.
Ano ba yun? Sa ikauunlad ng bayan, disiplina ang kailangan? Yeah.
And
Sorry,
so,
continue. Yes.
and there are some young people, when even my therapist, when I was who was when she asked the and I told her about martial law, and she didn't know what martial law was. So I think there was a problem there.
What
We
other observations would you?
and Yeah, this looking at the military as an institution. Because we are so personality oriented. Many Filipinos are very personality oriented. We don't look at so much at institutions.
Yeah.
I, there, there are good and bad people in all these institutions.
Yeah.
The the military is an institution, is a fascist, violent, coercive institution. It brutalizes even its own members.
Mhm.
That's why I wrote that poem to this
Lady.
lady guard, because she has been so, brainwashed by the military, and to make torture an unwritten policy, and to make extrajudicial killings and disappearances an unwritten policy.
Yeah.
That is institutionalized. These two projects which I saw there, the Project Bold and Project Fast Break, the names of the targets there are um, notes there. This one is for negation. This one is for neutralization. This one is for on the spot recruitment. So you have not even been arrested. You are already dead.
Hmm.
So the kind of arrest they will do depends on what they want to do with you. So when I was arrested the fourth time by men again in civilian clothes and put in an unmarked van, I thought, this is it. And
Right.
the whole time until I was brought to the police station, I was saying, give me a miracle, because there were dark streets from the airport to the police station. And no one knew that I was taken by them. It was actually an abduction. There were no arrest warrants, no nothing.
And you said that the torturers, many of them had been trained in Australia, and it was sexual, physical, mental, and emotional torture.
Yes, they know when to stop and when to push.
Right.
Because, well, when I signed up for this agents agreement, they gave me some orientation on illicit methods of elicitation, etc. And they said that if you push too much, the subject, as I call it, the subject, will become numb.
Right.
So he will overcome, he won't be saying anything anymore.
Right.
So
And
if you get the right timing to break the will of that person, once you break the will, they say, it will all go out. So the first information he gives when the will has not been broken yet, they don't believe those informations.
right. Right.
They only start taking in the information after the person is broken down. So
Yes,
they have to be it. They are trained to know when that breaking point is.
right. And also you said that,
Very systematic.
and you also said that you thought that women would primarily be sexually abused, and you realized that many of them, including yourself, were physically abused, right? You've been kicked in the stomach and, hit in the face, and it's not just sexual, it's actually physical,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I wasn't prepared for that. I was really jarred when I was kicked here in my face, and until now, my ear is painful every time it's cold. Because
Mm-hmm.
the whole half of my face was swollen, and then my teeth got out. So I can't really remember the pain of the kick anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But every time my ear hurts, I remember that I was kicked.
Mm-hmm.
I was punched in my stomach and my arms. And I didn't, well, I thought we Filipinos supposedly did not hit women.
Yeah, well, um, and I remember in one of your bulat pieces, to go back to the lady guard now in your fourth arrest. You were talking about life inside prison and how everything had to be bought, including water, including your necessities. And so tell us about, in a way, it's sort of very fascinating. You have this poem where you almost felt sorry for your guard, the woman guarding you, because she, could you read the poem to us?
Yeah, I think if walls alone made prisons, to my guard, the lady soldier who sits by the door. If walls alone made prisons, not the absence of bird song or the dark of starlit skies, you wouldn't sit there. But they couldn't keep the birds from singing in my soul and the stars from shining in my eyes. So you sit, stare, and try to become another wall. But there are prisons too, in eyes that see no stars in the sky, ears that hear only orders, lips that dare not ask why, thoughts that fear the obvious answers, arms that refuse to rise and try, and greater prisons there that hearts and minds do form, walls rising between sisters, walls around the nation's home. If walls alone made prisons, you wouldn't sit there, staring at your passing hours and years. You could be somewhere drying an orphan's tears. Or, like others, reaching out a hand, weaving a rainbow for this ravaged land. Perhaps even singing a song with me. If walls alone made prisons, you and I would both be free.
That's so beautiful and so moving, and it's it's humbling to see the sense of compassion you have for the person guarding over you. I mean, imprisoning you.
Yeah,
Um,
because I mean, they say they're just following orders
yeah,
and they didn't have a choice. Like,
they're in their own prison.
yeah.
Yes. And tell us about the butterfly in the back behind you. What is that?
Yeah, this one was something I drew during my fourth arrest. I did a lot of paintings and drawings, embroidery,
Mhm.
and just to release the stress
Mhm.
like prison. So it's a butterfly because butterflies are free. So
I see.
it's freedom. And then there are many, many small butterflies inside and
Mhm.
flowers and everything. And I said, color the butterflies, because if you color only the butterflies, not the flowers, then image of a mother and child would appear.
It's beautiful. You see, now I can see the mother and child. Now that I look closely at it.
the
Beautiful.
the one who bought this was sold for the nations,
Mm-hmm.
because we had money inside the prison. We had to buy our own water
Yeah.
and additional food, because the food inside prison is, prison food. So the one who bought this didn't couldn't see the mother and child. Only after I was released, and she showed it, she said, "I got your drawing." And I said, "Didn't you know? Didn't you see the mother and child?" And she said, "No."
That's wonderful. I love that. I love that. And both the mother and the child are free, can be free.
Um, because they're not in prison, they are in a butterfly.
Yeah. So if you had to say, what is your message to future generations, young people, old people, anybody? If there's something you want to say, but I guess to all the young people who know nothing about what happened and who learned something today after listening to your harrowing story, is there something, because throughout it all you were fierce, but you were calm, you were strong, you were beautiful. How do you, what do you advise young people today?
Yeah, I would advise them to be aware of what's happening, to study what's the situation around them, not just be into themselves, because the individualism today is very strong. You don't even go out with friends anymore, just with your cell phone.
Yeah.
So I would advise that young people go out into the world and be with the people, with their people, and see what's happening, and stand up for our humanity. Because this fascism, this militarism that happened during martial law and is happening now, not only in the Philippines, actually, it's even happening in the US, is very dehumanizing. It's dehumanizing for all of us. As I told you, even for the torturers themselves.
Yes.
They become brutes, and they want us all to become brutes. We have to stand up for our humanity. And that means standing up for the people who are being oppressed.
Yeah.
And of course, that takes a lot of courage,
Yes.
but it's very rewarding.
Yes, and I think that a misconception in people's minds is that during the Duterte years, there were EJKs primarily against people who were users of shabu, not the manufacturers, not the sellers, but the poor people who didn't have food and had to work, and so would do shabu, would take shabu so that they wouldn't get so hungry. But a misconception is that there are no more EJKs now, when in fact, the truth of the matter is that so many human rights activists in the regions, environmental activists, are still being targeted, but it's just not showing up in the media as much. Would you agree?
I agree. And also, the media has to be educated. The media has to be pushed to stand up for what's true,
Yeah. Yes.
even if it costs them their, well, because they will be red tagged.
Yeah.
And now we've won some cases against red tagging. This journalist, Atom Alaulio, won his case.
Yeah.
He was red tagged and he fought it out in court. So there are many things that we can do if only we have enough courage and if we work together.
So if you see wrongdoing, call it out and just, you know, do not feel fear.
You can feel fear,
Mhm.
but try to overcome it.
To overcome it. Well, on that,
In fact, I even wrote a poem about ordinary women, but of course it's not here anymore. It's a poem in Filipino about ordinary women who are afraid, who are, you know, they don't know anything about what's happening and they're afraid. But because they love their families, because they love their people, they learn how to be brave and they learn how to fight.
right.
So I said, I entitled it Ordinary, Kalaniwang Babae. I said, we are all ordinary people, but
Mhm.
it's the situation that makes us, that strengthens us and makes us brave if we choose to love freedom.
Well, that's very beautiful. And on that note, Adora, I thank you so, so much for this very revealing and very sad and but exhilarating conversation. And sa susunod, maraming salamat.
Okay? Maraming salamat.